Hello and welcome to The Life You're Made For. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Pinney. Often our world feels reactive, confusing, and chaotic. On this show, we're going to slow down together. Take a breath, listen, and learn. We'll be joined in conversations with influential thinkers who will help us make new connections, understand our unique potential, check the beliefs we hold, and learn how to overcome unexpected challenges. I know that each and every one of us holds our own inner clarity, confidence, and courage, what I call 3C living and leading. So let's go after it together. I'm cheering you on. I am so excited to have my new, but it feels like old friend, Dr. Lisa Smith. You know those type of people, you meet them and then all of a sudden you immediately click. I've had her on my show before, but I really love the work that she's doing for our next generation. And when I thought about having a conversation around leaderships in this next generation, I really wanted her voice to weigh in so that we can support this next generation that's going to be running our world. we got to clue into them, huh? So welcome, Lisa. It's so good to have you.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I always look forward to our conversations in whatever form they come, but I love this topic and I love talking about emerging leaders and what they bring. So I'm here and I'm ready.
Oh, good. Love it. Well, Dr. Lisa Smith teaches English at Pepperdine University in Malibu, California, which is a special place in my heart because my son is there and has taken some of her classes, which I love. She writes on topics such as historic, religious revivals, innovative pedagogy, and spiritual formation. Lisa earned a PhD in early American literature and can be found online at lisaraysmith.com. So fun to have you, Lisa.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So you were the first person I thought of. One, because my son loves you and took your class, mainly because I hounded him too. And I was like, take her class. You're going to love her.
Yeah, I did pass him also, so you're welcome on that. You don't want to repeat anything in college and pay for a second class.
Yes, thank you. That's the parent who's paying the bill. Thanks you very much.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
That's right.
But I have loved your work. You've written several books. I'm finishing up your George Whitefield book, Hammer and Fire. I'm holding it up on the screen for anyone who's looking at this or watching it. But I've loved that. I love anything with historical context and digs into a life and a soul that lived. And we can see how they ended their life too. I was joking with you earlier saying, I really love reading the historical context because we get the ending of their story. Whereas modern day examples, we're like, we're not quite sure how the story's going to end. I'm not sure if I want to follow this one or not. So
that's funny.
He was a phenomenal presence in this world. And I really am enjoying your book. But the reason I thought about you is I am really looking at emergent leadership. And as I'm working as a leadership coach and I'm seeing our 19, 20-year-olds coming into the workforce, I have such a heart for them. And I'm also seeing there's a very different flavor about them that is easy for some of our older generations to criticize. And so I guess I just want to jump in there and say, let's start there. How would you define this new generation, and especially as it pertains to leadership?
Yeah, I think we have to remember every generation at the emerging adult age in their 20s, even into the 30s, is a mixed bag in some ways. And some of the things that I really like about this generation is I think parents have done their job in terms of teaching these young adults that they matter. I have a lot of young adults in my classes who really do in their heart of hearts believe they are bringing unique things to the world. And I don't, when I was coming of age, when I was their age, I don't remember that message coming across as strongly just about the unique individual things that you offer. And I think they've gotten that message from their parents, from educators, coaches. And I think it's been good. We like to criticize them as being precious little snowflakes, but it's also good to know you're a snowflake. It's good to know that you have something that no one else has. That does give a passion and an energy and a motivation that I think is unique in this generation. So that's one piece that I think is really, really strong in this generation. And I'd say also I'm really struck by their sense of cooperation. They definitely
Mm,
see leadership as a shared enterprise.
mm,
They want to hear from everyone. They want everyone to have a voice. They recognize the power of diversity and the benefits of alternative viewpoints. And they're really cooperative leaders. You
mm.
probably have a word for it in leadership studies. I don't know that I know the term, but I just am very aware that they recognize stakeholders. They want everyone to be a stakeholder,
Mhm.
and they really kind of want to hear those voices. So yeah, those are two things that I stand out for me on the positive side with this generation: a real strong sense of what they bring to the table and a belief
Mm.
in what they're bringing, and a sense of cooperative leadership.
Oh, I love that. You know, you and I grew up in a different generation. We don't need to announce which one it was, Lisa, but it
That's
was a
right.
couple decades before them.
Yes,
And
exactly.
you know, we might say it was before the internet. And so there is this
Yeah.
that really makes us sound old, doesn't it?
Yeah, seriously.
But I think what it is, I'm loving what you're saying about the collaboration. I too have seen that where there's this awareness. And when you talk about personal value, I think it extends to other people. They have a value for others as well. They care that there's people are being seen, heard, and valued in a way that I didn't see it emphasized as much in our generation. So I'm just curious, what's some of the contrast you see if we could compare, you know, several decades ago versus today?
Yeah, I agree with that. They not only know what they're bringing, but they
Mhm.
recognize that everyone is bringing something. And I'd almost call it maybe a broader way of seeing individuals.
Mm.
I have a good friend who works in corporate America, and he likes to make the joke that whenever he's interviewing someone for a position at his company, if they're under 30 and they mention the phrase work-life balance, he's out. And he's
Uh-huh.
joking, obviously.
Uh-huh.
But that's that kind of piece. That's, I think, one example of how this generation of leaders has kind of broadened how they see the person they're leading. So they
Mm.
don't think about that person just in a work context or in a production context of how can I get this person to produce, but they
Mhm.
recognize that this person has outside things going on in their lives, that they bring more pieces that might not even be reflected in the job description, but can be accessed to really help them grow or to help the company. So I guess I'd call it kind of a broader sort of perspective. And I even hear it from students in terms of my own leadership in the classroom. Something I picked up on in student evaluations recently is they say things like, she saw me as a person, or she
Mm.
recognized I had other classes besides this one. Like
Mm.
they are happy when I broaden my understanding,
Hmm.
because it's easy to walk into any setting, and a classroom is particularly easy
Yeah.
because you know nothing about the people in front of you. You're with them for 4 months and everybody moves on. But
Hmm.
even in a work context, right, we can kind of get siloed and just see people in a particular context. And so I've really worked at kind of learning from them how
Mm.
to be aware of, oh, actually, they're mainly juniors and seniors in my class, which is a general education elective.
Hmm.
If they're juniors and seniors, that means they probably have at least two other major classes,
Hmm.
or they're doing an internship, or they're
Hmm.
thinking about applying for jobs. So I'm trying to broaden my perspective as well. And I really learned that from them. What does everybody bring into the small space where you're seeing them, but
Mm.
trying to keep all of that in mind? And, it can't all be, sort of managed. Of course, I have
Mm.
assignments and I have to work in my space, but I think they bring their understanding of themselves as unique individuals, and it's created this kind of broadening of how they view individuals that they are leading, and they're more sensitive to those sorts of things.
I love that. And I think you're on to something. You know, I work with younger leaders, and then you and I both have college age students or our younger generation and adult children, I should say. And I've learned so much from my adult children who want to just be known and understood. And so even little things like I'll say, well, help me understand what dating looks like, because in the 80s it looked very different. Like,
Oh, good luck.
yeah,
Did you figure it out? Yeah.
I I'm still lost on it, but at least I asked, you know, and they
Yeah,
described
right.
it to me. But then I realized, well, the way she described it, my daughter, and the way he described it, it was two different thoughts.
That's,
And so
that's
then I realized
interesting.
it's
Yeah.
more of that individualized awareness that they really want that valued. And, you know, being quicker to ask versus giving advice is really what I'm learning with this newer generation, to make sure that I am broadening my understanding and learning from them. And our tendency sometimes is to say, "Oh, I didn't do it that way. Why are you doing it that way?"
Oh yeah, that is so true, Heather. Gosh. And life is real, right? We also
Yeah.
get busy.
Yeah.
You shared before in your books about your time as an educator and just fatigue and hunger, and we're all juggling a lot.
Yeah.
So it takes that 1 minute to just take a deep breath and say, actually, maybe I should ask about this. And that
Yeah.
actually happened to me. We've started a new class at Pepperdine called Foundations of Reasoning, which
Mm.
is designed to help students. It's an onboarding class for students
Mm-hmm.
to understand the academic environment of a university, but it's also designed to help them with kind of critical thinking,
Mm.
civil discourse, understanding other perspectives. And at Pepperdine, we have a lot of different units that have to do with money, friendship, how you are as a citizen. But we also have a faith, peace, and
Mm.
spirituality unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was using a book that was, oh gosh, probably from the 1990s, a memoir, a spiritual memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it because the writer was great, well-known writer, and it was funny and all. But I had a student come up to me and say, hey, there are some newer memoirs that you could look at. And I'm like, I kind of haven't. I haven't found any. Could you help me?
Oh, love that.
And he stepped right in
Mm.
and we looked at a bunch of different memoirs. I found one. He read the whole thing for me. He said he loved it. He read it in one night.
Oh my
And
gosh.
there's a book length memoir. Yeah. And he's like, this is perfect. So I haven't tried it in the classroom yet, but I'm trying it actually next week in this class now this semester. But that was one example where he felt comfortable enough with himself, with me, and his sense of his fellow students
Mm-hmm.
to come forward and say, hey, is there a way we can freshen up this aspect of the course? And the content piece is a way we can do it. So that was a really good example to me of me not
Mm.
knowing. I didn't know that,
Yeah. Yes.
from a literary point of view, it was a great memoir that I was using.
Yes.
But he brought a different perspective and he enabled me to kind of adjust in that way. And he came alongside me too. I mean, he
Yeah.
was willing to look at them. He was willing to read the entire memoir that I gave him.
Well, and that goes back to when we first opened this conversation about their attribute of really collaborative thinking and collaborative work and
Yeah.
wanting to express his opinion and be heard on it, but not wanting to leave you alone in it, saying, I'll come
Yeah.
alongside you and check this out with you.
Yeah, I appreciated that because I think that moves away from just complaining, right? It's much more constructive.
Right.
And it does show, I think, a strong leadership trait that student was. I mean, students very seldom give input on curriculum. It's usually designed by the professor. I have another class where I'm trying to allow more student input on curriculum, but it's rare. So for him to feel comfortable talking to me about that and being willing to come alongside me, I think you're right. It's definitely a leadership trait. But I could have seen that as, oh, great. Now this memoir is not good enough. What, you need one by someone 22 years old? Yeah, right. I mean, I could have gone there knowing myself. I probably did, maybe a day or two. But
We have our
but
moments.
instead, yeah, we have our moments. But I took a minute and I was like, actually, if he's willing to talk about this and if he's willing to, that's a step.
Yeah.
That's a gutsy step to come talk to a professor
is.
about that.
Yes.
And then if he's willing to help me along, to come alongside me, as you say. So I had to kind of reframe how I saw that. But I think that's the tendency of leaders who have been at it a while. When we look at emerging leaders of any generation, we can sort of misinterpret maybe some of the things they're doing. And it takes stepping back and kind of really hearing them to be able to let them shine and help us.
Oh, I love that you brought that up about misinterpreting. And really the antithesis for that would be, or the solution I should say for that would be to stay curious. You're staying curious to, wow, this is a whole new thought for me. I'm not going to let it threaten my ego, maybe for a couple seconds, but we'll move past it, or not feel like I'm going to be managed by him, but to be able to be open to that. And then I love that he actually put the work in and read the book. but you're right. I think there's this, people don't know how to interpret it. And in reading your book, which I love, the chapter 7, where it's responding to culture, you gave an awesome example of this young woman who was getting too stressed out. And that's one of the complaints I hear about this new generation, is they're too easily triggered. But she was in a group project and she was getting too stressed out for the group project. And she came to you and wanted to do the individual project. Now, as an educator, I have to just pause here and say that has been an issue all through any of my, whether I was teaching little kids or whether I was teaching university level. These group projects are sometimes amazing success, and sometimes they're the bane of our existence, where everybody's just really frustrated with it. And then I think everybody has a story about it in their education. We're like, I was on that group project and I'm the one that did all the work. Or, I think we all have like PTSD from group projects. And so it was so fun to see how you handle it, because the fear is, well, are we coddling this next generation? And the way you handled it, which was to say, you know what, I care and I understand, but if I take away this opportunity from you, you're not going to learn to work in the group. So I'm going to ask you to stay in the group, but I'm going to come visit your group. I'm going to help you manage what's going on and the dynamics in the group. I'm going to help you divvy up the labor. I'm going to figure out what's going on. I thought, what an awesome response, so that you're not coddling her or letting her off the hook to probably learn some important group skills, like welcome to adulting. We got to work in groups. And that's part of living in life. We cannot sit there and make everything perfect for everyone's life and be able to teach that, but then not to leave her alone in it. I thought that was such an awesome way to handle that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it did take me a few group projects in to realize the level of trauma every student has. Group project, except for the ones that don't do anything and just cruise by on the A from the other people. I mean, half the class is totally happy, the other half is totally upset. But what made this case interesting, Heather, was this student actually had I don't know if you want to call it a label, but it was a diagnosis that was in her framework of how she viewed herself. And she admitted that her dislike of groups came from the fact that she believed that because she was working with this diagnosis, that she would not be successful in groups. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember if I put that in the book, but it actually kind of leveled things up because, it's a real situation in her life. And I wanted to be sensitive to that. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to work with that. And she was used to, managing that. But I also saw that this was an opportunity for her to see that even if that was true in her life, there were pieces maybe that she just hadn't yet encountered that would help her grow in areas that she might be maybe less confident in because of this diagnosis. So that was a really tricky place, trying to honor who she was and what she was able to do and put her in the best place for success, but also to say to her, hey, if you want, we could push this a little bit and give you an opportunity to try it. So that was a tough case for me. I did bring in, other people from the university. I got some advice, talked with her, and you're right. I kind of laid out a program for that group. And I don't remember if I put this part in the book, but she ended up writing me a really lengthy letter at the end of the semester saying, I didn't think that was an area where I could grow. But I did. And she even said it impacted other areas of her life, like her faith journey and some other things where she saw that even living with this diagnosis, she still had opportunity to grow within that. And that was a really big piece for her. And I've seen that even with any kind of challenge. I know I had a group of athletes from one particular team, like they were all together on one team in my class. And a handful of them just hadn't really gotten the background on how to take kind of a literary view of some of the works. And I thought, oh, why don't I just do a little special seminar for them? 30 minutes after class one day. It was like 7 or 8 of them in my class. I was like, let's all stay. Let's break it down. This is what you do. I'm going to write this all up on a page. I'm going to put it, on our website. You can access that. And of course, other students could access it also. But I walked through it with this group. And sometimes it is that simple, it really is. And so I've tried to work a little bit more of that into my teaching. And yeah, it's modeling leadership. And in that way, I think it's important for this generation, because the other thing this generation is dealing with, I think, is kind of the distrust of leadership. And I think, they've been burned by institutions. They've been burned by celebrity leaders. They've been burned by celebrities.
Yeah.
They've been burned by, different people in their lives. And I think trying to come alongside them, and instead of saying, oh, well, you're down here and the bar's up here, taking that extra minute or two to think about how can I kind of help them get up there. And that's what educators are designed to do, and that's what leaders in every sector are supposed to do. But I think for this generation particularly, if they find a leader they can trust, that's the other thing I'm seeing a lot in course evaluations, are students saying, I'm glad she cared. She showed she cared, and part of me is like, well, I have a PhD in this subject. You're paying money. I'm giving you information. What do you care if I care? But they do care. They've been burned too many times, and they've been in situations where they're not seen as people and where they aren't really encouraged to grow in the ways they want to. So I think that's another important part for coming alongside these emerging leaders, is being someone they can trust. And that's a perfect match with what you're doing in this series, because, your ideas of leading from the inside out, having your belief system and, leading according to your belief system. I mean, all the episodes I've heard in this series make that point, that authenticity matters, and it matters to this generation very heavily in their leaders. And so I think your ideas around leading from the inside out fit perfectly in there. And gray space.
Yeah.
Because lead from the inside out and then create a welcoming space. Me taking 30-minute class, that was a gray space, right? Let's draw these folks together. They can ask any question they want. I'm going to break it down real simply. And everyone's comfortable. They're learning something new and feeling confident that they can now step forward in it. So yeah, I think leading from the inside out, following belief system, and creating a gray space are some ways we can create trust as leaders.
I love that you brought up the trust. I didn't even think about that till you brought it up. And that's how I close gray space, with trust versus fear is the last practice. But I wrote it because I was seeing so much fear. And I like that you brought up trust, because this generation is looking for new levels of trust that you and I weren't looking for, and frankly didn't need. We didn't have the influence of all these influencers. We didn't have all the distractions of all these voices and trying to figure out if it's real. And now bring in AI, do we even know if any of these posts are real? You're just like, what is happening? And so I think the trust is at an all-time low with this generation.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes the older leaders are kind of like, well, suck it up, buttercup. I didn't have a diagnosis. I didn't have this, I didn't have that. But the reality is, this is what is happening for us to understand this new generation. And diagnosis, and I know I've heard that. I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's been a thing that's I've heard kind of not handled very kindly by this older generation, because we didn't have that, But how many people suffered in our generation because nobody was helping them understand themselves. And so to be able to integrate some of these diagnoses, to integrate some of these things that they're trying to communicate of a new self-awareness, we get to honor that. And we also then get to empower them and challenge them to live beyond that and not let that be limiting to them.
Yeah, I like your word self-awareness. That's a lot of what it is. And it's identity, right? And I mean, you know more than anyone as a leadership coach and an educator, and in your books. I mean, you speak very strongly to know your identity as a leader, know your identity as an organization, know your identity as a team, and then live out from that. And that's kind of what they're doing, these emerging adults. They're learning their identity. And by the time they get to me at 18, they've already gotten a lot of input. They have a family of origin, they have a peer group, they have coaches, they have teachers, they have doctors, they have all and the internet, right? So they've gotten a lot of input onto who they are, and some of it is helpful, right? Yeah. Some of those labels that and diagnoses that we didn't have would have been extremely helpful. We all have friends our age who are like, darn, if I had known that, it would, right? There's a freedom in it to see something validated. But on the other side, if you have too many labels, you think you already have your identity established,
Mm-hmm.
and you can kind of get locked in and not stay open to the other parts of yourself. And especially at 18,
Mm-hmm.
18 to 22 and into your 20s, your first jobs, you'll learn so much about yourself. So it's a balancing act
Mm-hmm.
of validating, recognizing the labels and being thankful for what they tell us about ourselves. But I just try to talk to students a lot about being open to new things here. And a university is a perfect opportunity for that.
Mm-hmm.
Pepperdine University is a residential campus. So that's great because usually they're living on campus, at least for a while. They're interacting with other people. We have a great international program.
Mm-hmm.
We've changed things in the core so they can take minors and double majors more easily. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of balancing act that I think we want to do. Take everything that's already been invested in them that has helped them establish their identity, and then have kind of an openness to what else you can learn about yourself.
Oh, I love that. I'm thinking about my own son's experience there of being a huge into athletics and loving that and watching a whole new major emerge called sports administration. It's really seeing where the trajectory of some of our employment is going in vocations, and to be able to support our youth saying, yeah, we need to know more about sports admin. And so I think Pepperdine has been one of the universities on the cutting edge of that, and putting it in the comm department, the communications department, I thought was really intriguing because most times they're put in the business department. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think those majors, they're definitely trending up. I see a lot of psychology majors. I
Hmm.
see a lot of integrated marketing and communication majors. I
Yeah.
see a lot of the sports admin, and actually English is growing also, because they're kind of recognizing that these majors that include the humans as humans and ask questions about humans
Yeah.
um, are important and are actually a great foundation for anything. I mean, if you look at
Hmm.
different studies, STEM majors have and pre-professional programs, of course, nursing, whatever, they have an easier time coming right out of
Hmm.
college and getting a job. But it's some of these other fields where you're really working with all that makes up a human being in whatever context,
Hmm.
sports or other areas. Those are the majors that you can build on that, and you
Hmm.
can apply that in a lot of different areas. So
Mm.
yeah, and I think that's a perfect match for a lot of young people these days because they are interested in people as people.
Hmm. Yes.
And they don't just want to study the math and science of things, but they want to be aware of how it impacts human beings.
Well said. So I want to ask this question. This is for all the parents out there who are trying to raise competent, amazing, positive contributors that give back to our society and move into a leadership positioning for themselves. I'm asking this for all the leaders out there who are mentoring these young leaders coming in the workforce. But I think empathy can go a long way. And so I guess the question I want to ask is, what are some of the challenges you see this next generation facing, and how can we come alongside them?
I feel like one of the challenges, and this just naturally comes from, whatever the strength you have, right? There's the
Hmm.
sort of associated challenge side.
Hmm.
And because this generation is so strong in empathy, as you say,
Hmm.
and understanding each other, and they've kind of broadened their concept of the person in front of them, and they love different perspectives. I think sometimes they just struggle with being the boss.
Mm.
Just realizing that you're going to have to make some decisions that people will find unpopular. You're going to have hard conversation. Well, excuse me, necessary conversations. I learned that from your podcast. I'm another
Thank you,
thing I'm
Lisa.
stealing from Dr. Heather Penny is that phrase, having necessary
Hmm.
conversations that are challenging,
Hmm.
pointing out areas where people need to grow. I
Hmm.
mean, all of the parts of leadership that can cause that kind of friction.
Hmm.
I as educators, of course, I have to work on that. It's hard to even give someone a B these days. They have a heart attack if it's not an A, because the stakes are so high and there's so much stress on them. But as I explain sort of things you can grow in, right? So everyone's okay getting a lower grade if I then say to them, okay, these are the good things I saw. And guess what? These are the 1, 2, 3 areas you need to work on. And whenever I return any assignment, I almost always say, moving forward, this is what you need to try, right? Because that automatically gives some hope. So I think if we can model hard conversation, just necessary conversations, if we can model saying hard things, challenging people, and kind of being the boss in that way, expecting things from them, I think that's one big piece for us to do to help emerging leaders. And I think also, if we can say to them, take your time, you don't have to have it all together. There's a lot of pressure on this generation, a lot of pressure on this generation to be perfect immediately.
Yeah.
First job, all right, be a leader, do it. Yeah. And sometimes they don't realize, your episode with your husband Darren, I thought was really interesting, because you guys talked about your progression as leaders, the different ways you've grown, and that's sometimes what can get missed with this generation, because they're seeing online, social media, and other places, they're just seeing pressure, and there is a lot of competition. And that's a reality. So they feel like they have to come straight into these new environments, be it college or a first job or a first promotion, a first leadership position. They need to come in as the perfect leader. So I would say modeling the hard parts of leadership and being the boss for them is an important piece, but also just helping them be patient with themselves. Yeah. Saying, okay, you did 4 things wrong, but here's 4 things you did right. Because I think there's a lot of pressure to succeed quickly in this generation.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you brought that up. A conversation's coming back to me where I had with a young leader, where I was challenging him to take an intelligent risk, and we were talking through it. And I said, okay, what are some barriers to this risk that's necessary for your professional growth? And we both agree that it was needed and necessary. So he basically said, well, people are watching. I'm like, what do you mean by that? But when he broke it down, I'm telling you, it was like a light bulb went off. You and I grew up in a generation where people were not watching us. There was no social media. There was nobody watching us. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, if I do this, people will start calling me out online and talk about me being a poser, talking about me trying to be something that I'm not. And I realized some of it was legit and authentic, where he's not lying. There's another side of the coin, though, is I'm like, some of it's this big illusion. People, not as many people are as watching as you think there are. And yet I also want to say they kind of are. So I was like, I never thought about that. And you talk about this pressure where he didn't want to take this risk. And it wasn't necessarily for his own personal fear. It was really more of what people were going to say about it. So we kind of had to walk through that. And I said, okay, maybe some people are watching, but the people that will comment on this negatively, they're not the type of people that you want in your life anyway. So we had to kind of talk through that. And then I kind of had to talk through, okay, then the people that are watching that you care about, what do you want them to be saying? And so he had to literally kind of break them into 2 camps, where I realized I didn't have to do this much work if I took a risk. I got to do it quietly behind the scenes. Nobody was watching me. And if I failed and fell on my face, I could just like, oh, great, pick myself up and just be glad no one watched me. Some of these people, we're looking at either thousands are watching them on social media, or they think thousands are watching them. I'm like, are that many people watching as you think they are? Like, and how many of them are robots? I mean, all these things. I had so many questions around this, but it was such a powerful conversation. I was just so grateful he was transparent with me, because his barrier was very different than what my barriers were that would block me from wanting to take an intelligent risk in my life. It had to do more with like insecurity or fear of failure or fear of disappointing or not pleasing somebody. His was like, well, I just don't want all these comments coming at me. I thought that was really powerful and insightful.
Yeah, that definitely is. There's a sense of the permanence of our personal record. I think
Yes. Yeah.
that this generation really has. We just in my American, I'm teaching a sort of broad American literature class. It covers all of American literature. So not just like in my specialty area, but all of it
Mm.
this semester. And we were reading Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance.
Mm.
And it's a great essay on kind of being true to yourself. And it so strongly resonates with this generation. And one assignment I like to do with it is I say, find one, we do this in class, pick one statement out of this entire essay, write it down and tell me why it means something to you. And it's interesting because there are certain statements that always kind of trend. And there's one, I hope I get it right, from Emerson. It's a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. The idea that now not consistency, but a foolish consistency.
Love that.
He says something like, if you're always looking over your shoulder at what you said before, you're never going to be able to change your mind and grow and become someone different. And that's a little bit, I think, of where the failure piece and the fear of risk comes in for this generation of leaders, is they feel like they're really trapped to whatever they did and whatever they might do. And the students really talked a lot about that idea in Emerson's essay, that why can't we be in a place where who you were yesterday is who you were yesterday? And hopefully you have some consistency, but not that you're kind of locked into that. And I think that's how this generation sees risk and failure, that it's going to lock me in. It's going to stay with me forever. And I mean, in some ways, they're not wrong.
Yeah, you're right.
Things are recorded and you do have to be a little bit careful. But I think you're right that plays into, for sure, their desire for risk. Absolutely. The other, my freshman class, I have 2 freshman sections on this new Foundations of Reasoning class, and we were talking about character traits, and the character trait of courage was like, just lightning flashing through both classes. And they were like, yes, we're all scared to do anything. We're scared to do anything wrong. We're scared to take a step. We're scared to, because this judgment is going to come crashing down on us. So that part, I think, is hard for leaders. And I think what you did is instructive, actually, is you helped him break it down. Because a lot of times just talking about it and saying, okay, who's really seeing this? And also what's more important, right? That was your question to him.
Right.
This is an opportunity to grow. Do you want to sacrifice that on the possibility that somebody might dislike? So I think helping them break it down, helping them talk through it. I think sharing our own failures. That's what I liked about your episode with Darren was, you guys talked about how those failures impacted you. I think sharing that can help younger leaders see that you actually can grow from things. But that area, I think, is real. I think that fear is real.
Yeah, it really grew my empathy around this new generation. And as I work with the younger leaders, that's really where we start. They want to, I can see their barriers are how many people are watching. And one of the things I talk about is you only need one person in your corner that believes in you. It's much lesser than you think. You don't need 5,000 followers to go take a big risk.
That's a good point.
And I think it's something you and I got to experience, whether it was in 8th grade and you need your little buddy behind you that's just going to stand up for you, or whether it's a 55-year-old person right now, like moving into doing podcasting or wanting to start a company. You just need some 1 or 2 people just to believe in you. You don't need the masses, which I think is a myth, where they need to have all these followers. I'm like, you don't. I think Brene Brown even talks about that. If you have a handful of people around you.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. And Heather, I want to also highlight your idea of beliefs, internal belief system that will naturally flow out in leadership. Because the other thing that I find is this generation also needs training, as we all did in our 20s and 30s, in centering themselves and deciding who they are.
Yes.
The other statement that was really popular from Emerson's essay, and I can't quote this one directly, but it's a statement where he says, when you're out in the world, it's easy to have the world's opinion. And when you're in your own home in solitude, it's easy to have your own opinion. But what we want is to bring into the world, I think he calls it the independence of solitude. So who you truly are bring that to the world. But I think we sometimes today, with busyness and, the ubiquitous phone and other things, input different devices, I think we sometimes skip over the step of the solitude part.
Oh, well said.
It's hard just to fight for your views and even just to hold on to your own views in the world if you haven't taken the time to decide who you are. I mean, you do that right in your leadership coaching. You pull teams aside, you pull leaders aside. You say, let's start here. Let's not start with that issue and how you're going to talk to that person.
Exactly.
Let's start with who you are and what you want your gray space to be, what you want, what are your beliefs. And I think this generation, that's why I like mindfulness. I like that is trending now. Pepperdine is building an entire resilience center, and we have a new program that students go through that teaches them to take a minute, take a breath, do it daily. Work in some kind of practice. Turn to your faith, turn to your family, turn to your values, turn to your tribe, as you say, right? Take whatever you need, take that time and make it almost a discipline in your life, because you cannot have the independence of solitude in the world if you haven't cultivated it in solitude.
Well said. Yeah. Or you can't hear your identity formation in a group. And I think I love that you brought this up, because that's another thing I'm realizing as you're talking. I'm like, this is what I'm working with young leaders and some of these younger leaders that I'm mentoring, is this concept of not everything is corporate, not everything is group, not everything is collaborative. As much as you value that, I love that about yourself. But if you're only going to stay in there, you're going to lose your balance of much needed alone time. And even the idea of and I've literally coached around this. What's the amount of time that you want to give yourself to respond to a text? I've had to get that concrete.
Oh, wow.
Because
interesting.
The feeling was, if I don't respond within 5 to 10 minutes, this person's going to feel offended. And I'm like,
oh my gosh, that's me, Heather. I need this lesson. Go on. Go on. I'm like the fastest responder. Everybody's like, whoa, what are you doing? I need this lesson. Keep going.
Well, if it works for you, it works for you. But what I was seeing was an intense anxiety. And then, of course, you're probably keeping up with a handful of people or whatever. We're talking, these are people that they're trying to keep up with half their high school or half of their work buddies. And so I'm like, how many texts do you have coming in a day? I mean, you and I have maybe in a manageable, maybe 10 to 15 coming in, and they're like, 150. And I'm going, oh, whoa.
Wow.
You have to start educating your connections that you don't respond on the fly.
That's good.
That was a whole brand new thought for many of them, where I said, okay, let's talk about how you want to say that to them. You talk about the difficult conversation. I'm like, this is a very needed one. This is a very necessary one. You've got to tell your friends, I don't respond within minutes, but give me a couple days. I may respond. Or here's a real news flash. You can actually tell people I'm kind of done texting. If you want to get a hold of me, feel free to call me or email me. I mean, that was like, what? I can do that?
Wow. And, I didn't think that was allowed. Okay. That's good to know. That's good to know. Wow. That's a truth bomb there. Okay.
But if you're seeing that anxiety rise, but with you, Lisa, I'm like, maybe you're loving it. It works for you. There's a freedom where I look at, what we get to have with texting. Remember, we had to pick up the phone. You're like,
oh my gosh.
I've got to
people our age love texting. No, it would. And listen, I think I'm older than you. I was before even, some people didn't even have answering machines. So you were like calling and you're like, oh, I guess I got to catch them when they're home. I mean, that was real. If your friend was late in buying an answering machine, you were like, we're done. We're done here. We can't be friends. So there's a beauty in the immediacy of texting. Yes. It's so easy. It's so simple. My mother is older, and I mean, it's great for her. She can keep in touch with the grandkids, see pictures. It's so wonderful. But you're right. We have a manageable amount.
Yeah.
And it's very different when you're completely overwhelmed.
Or if you don't even like the person. I was like, well, you don't have to you don't have to keep engaging with this relationship. That permission to kind of be selective in your relationships, whole brand new thought with this next generation. I love that going back to what you first originally said, just that curiosity. I'm learning to slow down and say, well, wait a minute. I can see the fear across your face. And all I did was recommend you to, do a whole new professional thought with leadership. But help me understand why you're nervous about this. And help me understand what some of these barriers are. They're not the same barriers that I grew up with. And they're legit. And so being able
Yeah.
to shift your teaching, my coaching, to come alongside them and say, yeah, I haven't experienced that barrier. First of all, tell me more because I care. And I didn't even think about the people are watching. That's the biggest barrier that I'm dealing with now. And then also being able to help them be more selective. I'm like, you get to decide who you care about watching you. That was a whole new thought. It was just like
That's a good point.
their
Yeah.
life is just free game for everybody. And I'm like, it's
That's an
not.
excellent point.
And
Yeah.
you get to decide which person that you care about their vote the most. And then you also get to decide how people handle your life. If you don't like it, you get to unselect them, versus I have to just keep putting up with it. I'm like, you don't have to do that. These are all conversations that I'm having with some of these newer leaders to help them be a little bit more selective in caring for really their heart and their sense of identity and self so that they can kind of relax that central nervous system and really begin to try new risks that they were scared of trying because of either the perceived fear people watch them or people literally were watching them.
Yeah, I think in-person interactions I'm finding are very difficult for
Mm,
some of these younger
mm,
people. The number of people coming to my office hours has
mm.
dropped fairly dramatically.
Really?
Because they would feel more comfortable with an email, and I get that.
Mm-hmm.
They a lot of these students went through COVID. They
Mm-hmm.
had a couple years where they didn't, in formative years where they didn't have as much in person. I recently was sharing with a group of younger students some of the things I did in college around dating and
Mm-hmm.
some of the conversations I had. And one girl looked at me and said, "Wait, you had all these conversations in person with people?" I'm like, yeah, how was I going to do
We
it?
had other
She's like, you
options.
talk to them face to face. I'm like, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
but I get it. Like she's
Mm-hmm.
been in a different world. If you think
Mm-hmm.
about the majority of their communication is through
Mm-hmm.
text.
Mm-hmm.
And so the face to face, I think is, and that's why I'm glad you shared about how, when you meet with them one on one,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of help them
Mm-hmm.
process that. But that's a piece they're getting used to. And, we all got used to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we had more opportunities
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't have the other digital
Yeah.
mechanism. So it's not abnormal to need to
Yeah.
get used to that. We
Yeah.
all learned how to look people in the eye, how to
Yeah.
shake their hand, how to say our,
Yeah.
so there's nothing wrong with this generation that they don't know it. It's just that they haven't had the opportunities perhaps that we have.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. So this question is for our young leaders.
Okay.
What advice would you give them to our young leaders who are entering the workforce and entering into leadership for the first time? Because we do have some young leaders that are getting into leadership at a very young age. What's some advice you would give them?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I've even seen it with my own kids.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunities that I don't recall my husband and I having,
Mm-hmm.
this early. Um, what would I say to them? I would say sort of what I said to the parents to pass on. Take your time, but see it as a learning experience.
Mm.
For example, my younger son has been getting a lot of leadership opportunities in the department that he's in because he has a lot of older colleagues who are retiring or moving out. So it's just sort of this circumstantial thing where he's stepping into things at 24 that I wouldn't have expected him to step into. And
Mm.
what I keep saying to him is, kind of what we've said, you don't have to be a perfect leader, but if you are a young leader, you have opportunities to learn things that some of us did not get to learn until late
Mm.
20s, early 30s. So while you may feel unprepared for all aspects of that leadership position, realize the value in the learning pieces
Mm.
of it,
That's good.
because it is an opportunity that you don't always get, and it may come your way for different
Mm-hmm.
reasons. So I guess go back to your idea of stay curious.
Mm.
Yes, you want to bring your skill set to it, but it's a good opportunity to
Mm.
get lessons that you don't always get. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
understand that kind of as educators.
Mm-hmm.
When you're trained with a four-year degree or a master's in education, you don't become an assistant teacher. You have a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Here's your class. Here's 30 students. Have at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's
Yeah.
that's an example of what I would call a
Mm-hmm.
leadership jump. You're placed in a position that actually is the same level as the 20-year veteran teacher down the hall.
Yeah. Yep.
So be open, it's okay not to know everything, but realize that that's a really precious opportunity. So that's one thing I would say to younger leaders is if you feel like you're in a leadership position kind of early, try to decrease stress by saying, this is a great learning opportunity for me. I would also say, along your idea of kind of having people in your corner, be open to bringing people into your sphere that maybe you wouldn't expect or are very different from you. So maybe there's, a woman in her 50s who's been through a lot of leadership opportunities. It might feel weird to say, hey, can we have lunch? It doesn't have to be full on mentoring even, but just reach out to people even in different departments. I actually did this recently at Pepperdine, even though I'm not a young leader. But I thought to myself, I'm like, I teach literature. We have an excellent librarian who's a librarian of emerging technologies and runs our makerspace at Pepperdine. And I'm like, I have zero idea what literature and a makerspace can do together. But I like this librarian. I like this woman. She's got great ideas. She's done a ton of cool things with the makerspace. So I just reached out to her and I'm like, hey, I'm teaching an American Lit class. What can you help me?
Yeah.
Can we bring together our pieces, even though we're not a natural match, right? And we have had so many amazing collaborations. We've done a virtual reality thing for one of my literature classes. She in one of my freshman classes, she did this whole session around kind of play and space, and we're working with clay and the Cricut cutter. And I mean, it's been a really fruitful collaboration. And sometimes if you're a young leader, you don't look outside your own sphere to bring in people who you think you might not be a match with, but sometimes they can really enhance your leadership. They can teach you things. They can be an advocate that you may not expect. So that would be a couple things I would share with emerging leaders. And what we said before about being patient, giving yourself a break and getting a leadership coach. If you can do that, I have several friends who younger people in their department have asked them, hey, would the department have the funds for me to have a leadership coach for a few months, 6 months? And wow, it's been incredible. And this generation's really good at recognizing when people with particular skill sets can help them. And I think leadership coaching is one. And I'm sure you're seeing younger and younger leaderships, not just the C-suite, right? I'm sure you're adding people who are even in their first leadership position. I'd love for my son to have a leadership coach. So I think that's another thing for them to keep on their radar if they're in a position where they have the resources, their department has the resources for that. That can be great.
I love that. Yeah, and you're right on. My whole world is expanding. I love working with the emerging leaders, which is why I wanted to do a talk on this. But it's the C-suite teams that are also asking me to work with the emerging leaders because they care about these emerging leaders and they can feel a little bit of the gap and they're not quite sure how to navigate that. And so I'm able to not only serve the emerging leader, but serve the C-suite teams to support building that bridge so that they can both walk over it back and forth and be able to have a stronger working relationship. And those are the kind of companies and workspaces I love working for. And I think you're right on. There's more funds out there than even our young leaders realize if they just speak up. Most of them, the C-suite team wants to help them because they're not quite sure how to navigate themselves.
Yeah. And I think your work now, I'm sure, is a bit of translation work, like we've been talking about here. They see a young leader who wants to progress and maybe they feel is being too aggressive, asking for promotions or asking for more responsibility. But to the young leader, they feel such intense pressure to succeed because if they don't succeed immediately, they feel like they're behind.
Right.
That's where sometimes like a communication disconnect can happen. And so I'm sure a lot of what you're doing is kind of translating between the two groups because it's a very different landscape now for young leaders. And that's what I appreciate when I encounter young leaders who can, like I've shared examples of, can kind of talk to me, give them, and like you've been saying, give the background of why they're thinking this way and help me to reframe it and understand it.
Well said.
And vice versa. I mean, young leaders need to understand what older leaders can bring. Things like like I said, not being afraid to be the boss, not being afraid to challenge and push people, not caring how many likes or dislikes you have. So it goes both ways.
Oh, I love it. Well, as we wrap up, this has been such a great conversation. I guess let's just leave it with some encouragement. You can decide to encourage the young leaders, the old leaders, mentoring the young leaders, or both, whatever you want to do. But what would be some encouragement you'd like to leave?
I think I would probably say recognize that people are people. I think that's a lot of where I've landed. I've been teaching for a couple decades now, and I know you can speak to this with your experience. All of the things we're talking about as far as older leaders and emerging leaders and different landscapes and social media and all of that is true, but all of that is always true. And if anything, you mentioned my interest in history and my work there. A lot of these books I'm writing is bringing these kind of timeless truths from history into now. And the only reason that's possible is because people are people. People were people in the 18th century. People were people in the 500s. People are people now, and people will be people in 2600. And that's, I think, one of the biggest pieces for leadership. We are people, so we lead from who we are. And I know you've been very clear with that in your leadership teaching on this podcast series alone and in other series. But we lead from who we are as people, but we're leading people. And so there's more commonality than we think. There's more hope than we think. There's more potential than we think, because it's a human to human contact. And whatever was in us is in the person that we're working to move forward. And if they can recognize it and we can recognize it, I think that commonality can go a long way toward realizing how much we can do together. And how much we really can encourage each other, and how little fear we really do have to have about each other. We can put a lot of that aside because it is people working together. And like you shared in your book, Gray Space, I think you said, the percentage of people who don't want a gray space is like, negative 10%.
Yes,
right?
Zero.
So, sorry, I don't know math.
Your literature.
Yeah, exactly. But we all really deep down have those values, regardless of what we've been through. And that encourages me as a leader. That encourages me as a mentor of younger leaders. And I think it can create a lot of cross-pollination and a lot of working together and a lot of hope for the potential that we all have. Well said.
And I'll add my 2 cents to that too. I think this is probably because it's on my new book I just finished up, but this one of the practices really is stay curious. So I would just say, yes, that's the heartbeat of all of that. If we're just staying curious about each other, and I love that your thought about we've got more in common than we realize, and we don't have to fear each other, and it doesn't matter. The differences don't have to be a barrier. It gets to be something that we can be curious about and actually learn. I have loved learning from this new generation, and encouraging the younger generation to enjoy learning from the older generation. And I think as we all stay curious together, we really can. We can move humanity forward, as Maria Shriver likes to say.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure. We need it. We need it now more than ever.
We sure do. Well, thank you so much for your time, Lisa. It's just been always a pleasure. I love bringing you on, and I just knew this was a topic we were going to have fun talking about.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to it. I love hearing your ideas, and so much of what you do is applicable in every field, but I love applying it to education because, it's a blessing for me to get so many new young people brought into my life every 4 months, so it's been a joy to work with them. And I've appreciated a lot of what you've shared through your books and your podcasts on how to lead them and how to encourage them. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Well, Lisa and I are cheering you all on. Thanks so much for listening in. It was a great conversation, wasn't it? Wow. Check the show notes for any additional resources. Also, maybe where to find our guests. And if you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review. It sure helps us out. Thanks so much. We are always cheering you on.